Good morning to all of our viewers and listeners, and to our panel of experts, to our very first webinar on UK and EU relations. My name is Tom Spanring. I'm Austrian and American and the Secretary General of SME Connect UK. I'm based just outside London in beautiful Horsham in West Sussex, so very close to the continent and very close to the south coast. I have owned and managed SMEs in the EU, in the UK, and in the US. I was educated in England and spent most of my professional life here. My family lives here, my children go to school here. And so it's just natural for me to have a strong interest, as it is in fact, for the about 3 million EU citizens living in the UK at the moment, and the 1.3 or so million British citizens living in the European Union, to find out more about the future relationship between the UK and the EU. From the outset, questions from the audience are very much welcome, so please use the chat box on your screen and I will read them out to you. I'm delighted to welcome as our experts this morning Ms. Anthea McIntyre, MEP for the West Midlands from 2011 to 2019, herself an entrepreneur and businesswoman. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning. And also Dr. Paul Rübig, MEP for Austria from 1996 to 2019. Businessman, entrepreneur, and president of SME Connect. Welcome and good morning. Before we head to the first question, just as a general introduction, in preparation for this call, I looked back, and if I remember, a year ago on the news, there was nothing else on apart Brexit. The country was gearing up for an election which took place on the 12th of December 2019, a very important election. It gave the present government, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, an overwhelming majority of about 80 seats in Parliament. And Britain was ready to leave the European Union after 47 years of membership, the first sovereign nation to ever do that. And as you know, it happened on the 31st of January 2020. The preparation for that, or the legal act that was introduced, as the European Union Withdrawal Act of 2020, a very important act. Preceding to that was a court battle challenged, important case, Miller versus the Secretary of State on the supremacy of the royal about the royal prerogative of the government. Now, 7 months, 9 months almost on, a pandemic later as well. The news coverage has been only very slight. Anthea, what is your take on the status quo?
Well, you're absolutely right in your brief of where we are. Britain is more dominated by the pandemic than it is by Brexit, whereas a year ago, obviously, we hadn't heard of the pandemic and Brexit was rapidly approaching. And people, I think part of the reason why Brexit has taken a back seat is that we kept being told, Brexit's going to happen, get ready, and then it was delayed. So we had several times where, come hell or high water, die in a ditch, we're leaving on whatever date it was, and then it was extended. And I lived through this as an MEP because I stopped being an MEP on the 31st of January this year. So I'm very aware of how business in my region particularly was sort of kind of saying, well, when it happens, then we'll worry about it. Because businesses most of the time are far too busy running their business, coping with all the problems that come up, and aren't prepared to make plans for something that might not happen. So it's really only in the last couple of months that the government has pushed business to look at what is actually going to be the effect come the 1st of January next year. And I think people now believe that it really is going to happen. And there are, in terms of sort of advertisements on TV, there's quite a lot saying, things are going to change, you better go and check what's going to happen. And I think the more people do check, the more they realize that this could be a very serious problem for them. For example, if you want to take a lorry with goods to Calais, you have to get a permit before you can even get into Kent. And this is obviously to prevent queues all the way down the motorway to the port. But it is something that people are suddenly going to have to adjust to. So my take is that people it's still on the back burner because they're still more worried about the pandemic and its effects, but people are beginning to appreciate that things are going to change and they will need to do something.
Anthea, to follow up from your points, do you think the mood has shifted? Would you say that the general feeling in the industry is one that is positive?
I think that the government has done a huge amount to help businesses keep going. So things like the furlough scheme, where employees can be paid 80% by the government. The scheme has changed a little bit about whether the employer has to contribute to pension and national insurance and so on. But overall, it's been really welcome. And it's just been extended to the end of March. And that gives people confidence, I think. And it's not just that, but there have been a lot of grants, etc., particularly for small businesses, which I think have made a tremendous difference. So we saw obviously enormous growth in the economy in the last quarter because it was catching up from the lockdown the first time. But I think that there is a lot of confidence actually in the economy, and people are, I think we got beyond, do we want Brexit or not? I think we are where we are. We want to make sure that business continues to thrive. And despite, there are still a lot of concerns people have, and we can start talking about those. But overall, I think it's pretty positive.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good point to ask Paul for his input. Paul, Donald Tusk very famously sang a song, a lullaby to the British people about staying. Are you going to sing to us this morning?
So, freedom of speech, huh? Yes, Anthea, very warm welcome. I'm happy to see you again. We were a very good team in European Parliament, and as I told you, we miss you. It's so important to have the British mood of understanding what's going on the globe and all the knowledge which comes in. But you know, it's a never-ending story. We know that it's not too easy. As you know, I'm a blacksmith from my profession, and I'm an educated blacksmith. So I grew up in a family business, and at least someday I went to an engineering school and then to business administration, wrote my thesis about international patent and license policy. And as I finished my study, my father told me, and now you shouldn't come as a blacksmith into our company. You should start with export of our products. Huh? And so I looked on the landscape, and I thought Germany would be the easiest one because it's very close, same language, not too much difference, different currency, of course, but that's to overcome. So I started to sell our products in small quantities, and I was confronted with all these customs troubles. Huh? And the customs troubles are quite expensive because especially if you are an SME and you have to go to a company who makes all the customs for you. You have to know the origin rules, you have to know the number of your product, it's a preferential agreement, it's a lot of things which you have to clarify. And every week I went from Austria to Germany and I had to cross border. So the officials there at any time tried to tease me. So it's wrong number, wrong formula, you need a different formula, you need a carnet, you need a T1, you need a T2, and if you went to an exhibition, you had to put everything on a list, and then they checked it in Austria, they checked it in Germany. So it was really troublesome for SMEs. And at this time, I swore to myself, whenever it's possible to get rid of customs control, I will do anything to kick these guys away from the border. And that was the reason that I was nominated for the regional parliament in Upper Austria. I immediately got the chairmanship of the European Committee. So I was one of the early starters to ask in Austria for being member of European Union. And I think altogether in these 5 years, I had 250 meetings with all the people who were against the membership to European Union. And I was at least really qualified to have a hot debate with them. And as you know, it's normally very emotional. But at least after 5 years, 2/3 of the Austrians decided to join the European Union. And then I was short in the national parliament, and then I started in 1996 in European Parliament. And you know, the first time where I could sign a check with euro, not German marks again, because with German marks, the floating of the money was quite expensive. The change of the money you had to pay, and of course, especially with Italy, it ran into serious problems. But with Germany, it was quite nice that we got the same currency. And the first time where I crossed the border without customs, without these people who take your money, your time, only wasting, only bureaucratic, only red tape, really moving over the border, the freedom. And that was really the feelings that together in European Union, especially for SMEs, it's so important. And if you know that we have approximately since Great Britain is with European Union, we signed more than 700 international treaties. And we got now also a list for the end of the year, what you have to, where we have to take care on the relationship. And it's you know, it's air transport, it's animal breeding and transport. So you know, if you transport animals cross border, a horror. You need certifications and whatever. It's asset management, it's audiovisual media service, it's safety aviation and maritime security, it's banking and payment service, it's biocide products, it's civil justice, it's clinical trials, it's company law, it's consumer protection, it's copyright, it's cosmetic products, it's credit rating, it's data protection, it's e-commerce. I could now the whole meeting use for which kind of change it is, but at least we all know it's like a normal divorce, you know. And I think we should have priorities. And in a divorce, the first thing is to look to the people. The people, the Brits who works on European Union's ground, and the European Union people working in Great Britain. I think that should have the priority in the activity. I think the money is now more or less cleared up. And of course, the border situation, is quite critical. So I think it's not only the Irish question. I think it's also the question of Gibraltar. It's what happens in Cyprus. So the border is something where the Scottish will play their own game. So the whole thing is a big divorce between our very efficient, nice European family. And you know, the people which are doing this battle from outside of European Union, I think it's a hybrid war. It's a kind of hybrid splitting up the interests of the Europeans against other powers in this world. And we know that it's not only a game from some people. I think it's very effective structures behind. And there, you know it from Brussels, we have lobbyists and NGOs, and some of them have money without limit and influence. So also media is heavily involved into this game. And the one who suffer, it's the people who do the work, it's the handicraft people, the SMEs, it's the taxpayers. Huh? So we know that at least somebody has to pay the bill, and that makes me really angry.
Paul, thank you very much. Before Anthea, I'll ask you to respond, to share with you. 1996 was a very important year for me too. I started university after studying in England as one of the first intake after Austria newly joined the European Union. In 1995, I campaigned when I was 17 years old and preparing for my Matura. I campaigned very much in favor of Austrian membership of the European Union. And the second date that is of personal relevance to me is the 23rd of June 2016, because it's the birthday of my daughter Felicity. And I remember I was living in the United States at the time. I remember getting the first reports, and I spent the whole day in hospital. I was very tired. Before I went to bed, the first referendum results came in. The north of England, Sunderland, going to be overwhelmingly Remain. And then when I woke up, I had this string of text messages from friends and family in Europe saying, "Oh, what happened? What happened?" Anthea, how do you see the UK preparing for? I mean, we've had the transition period, preparing for it, the end negotiations. What is going to happen? And I know you don't have a magic crystal ball to foretell the future, but in your opinion, what do you think is the likely outcome?
Well, it's interesting. I very much agree with what Paul was saying, his analysis of the situation. And certainly I can remember when we were, before we had the European Union, and the difficulties of going to an exhibition, because my husband has a product which we export around Europe and in fact around the world, and to go to an exhibition from the UK, sort of UK to France to Belgium to the Netherlands and all the way back, and at every border you had to have the stamp, and it was such an amazing document that he kept it. And about 10 years later, the French authorities demanded some tax from him for importing goods to France. And fortunately, he could demonstrate that he hadn't imported anything. He's got the stamps on this document and he's kept it for 10 years. So my fear is that we go back to that sort of situation. That's why I don't think that when we were sold the idea of Brexit, there was no mention of no trade agreement. We were told that was all going to be sorted. And I actually think it will be. I may be an eternal optimist, and I know that we're getting very close to the deadline, but I suspect that there will be a deal. I think what was very important in all the negotiations prior to the withdrawal was, as Paul said, the importance everyone placed on people. And the European Parliament, as the directly elected representatives of the people of Europe, were very clear that they wanted to make sure that British people had the right to continue living and working in the EU, and that European citizens had equal rights over in the UK. And the government here has set up something called the Independent Monitoring Authority, which is set out in the withdrawal agreement. But it's kind of encouraging that it's all in place. It has about 65 staff. It hasn't launched yet. It won't actually take off until the 1st of January. But it's there to ensure that any future legislation, any operation of particular authorities, local authorities, national authorities, ensure that the rights of European citizens living and working in the UK is properly protected. And I think that's a very, very positive step. And I mean, it's not altruistic. The UK very much relies on the European workers that we have here. It's often talked about in terms of agriculture, that we've had something called the seasonal agricultural workers scheme, where people come and pick fruit or whatever and go home again. But it's much, much more than that. If you actually look on the fruit farms, I live in a glorious part of the country in Herefordshire, surrounded by fruit and vegetable growing. But those businesses, and they are very large scale businesses, don't just require seasonal agricultural workers. Most of the management is actually from the European Union, and the workers that they've lived here, you know, for many years, and they're running the businesses and very much engaged. So I think from the UK point of view, it is hugely important that the rights of EU workers to live and work here is protected. And I believe it has been. So I do think that that's a very positive step forward. We know that the negotiations on trade have been going on for months and months and months. I think it's very encouraging that Michel Barnier is actually in London this week. He hasn't given up, and I don't think that the UK side will either. And we know that we've got a couple of sticking points. Fisheries keeps raising its head, and it's become a very large issue, but I really don't understand why that is so. I can tell you that the Scottish fishing industry is a very good lobbying organisation, and they're desperate to keep their position. But
if I may add, fishing quantities of what species of fish could be caught where and when has always been a sticking point.
Indeed. And, you know, the British are very keen on their fish and chips, but most of the fish that they eat is imported. The main fish that the UK fishing fleets catch is herring. And most of that, about 95% of that, is exported to Norway and the Netherlands. So when you actually sort of look at it, you know, everyone, it's rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves. We've got to have the rights of our borders, you know, our coastal borders, and protecting our fishing communities. But the fishing industry is 0.1% of the UK economy. So, you know, it's about the same as the tanneries. We don't hear them shouting a lot. So I feel that it's become this real political football. But I think someone has to say, stop being ridiculous. A trade deal with the EU is much more important to everybody else. So I do think that that's got to be sorted. I think the border with the Northern Ireland border, between Northern Ireland and the Republic, that I think everyone is very committed to maintaining the Good Friday Agreement, to maintaining peace that was so, hard won in Northern Ireland. I think we are all completely committed to that. And it's interesting, we'll come on, I'm sure, to talk about America, but, Joe Biden, President-elect, is very keen on the Good Friday Agreement because he's Irish by background. But I think we all are. And it's been an obvious problem for ever since we first started talking about Brexit, and it's been fudged, and as they say, the can's been kicked down the road. But there is a solution there, and I think that the government has to just set it out and press on with that. So by now I've pretty much forgotten what question I was answering, but I guess it's the crystal ball. As you say, I don't have one, but a trade deal is hugely important, both to the UK and to our EU partners. And where there's a will, there's a way. And I do think that there is a will, and I do think we'll achieve it.
Thank you, Anthea. Paul, do you agree with Anthea's assessment? Is there a will on the European Union side?
Yes, like always, I agree with her, because we always had a very good partnership also in European Parliament. And we all know that State Secretary Groove, of course, is a very good negotiator. And we know that it's a strategy where, of course, Britain looks for new partners around the world. So I think more than 50 trade agreements were successfully done, and they are still, after 1st of January, a member in the WTO. And as you know, I was for a long time the chairman of the Parliamentary Assembly of the WTO. And therefore, the base of living together is WTO rules. So if we get a hard Brexit, WTO rules will help us to at least not get into a trade war, because trade war is normally, like every war, both sides lose. And that's clear that, and that's where I'm always so afraid, if we have a no deal, Great Britain would be handled like Uzbekistan. So, because with Uzbekistan, European Union, I think, has 1 or 2 treaties and nothing else. But anyway, we also do trade with Uzbekistan, so it's not the end of the story. But it's very burdensome. It's all the payments which have to be done, the taxation, the tariffs. It's a lot of troubles for the value chain.
Maybe, Paul, can you share with us, now the European Union has 27 member states, and then as Anthea mentioned, there are certain hot topics during the negotiations that are just very close to the British heart. One of them could be identified as fishing. You mentioned Gibraltar, similar to the Falkland Islands. This sovereignty of British territory is something that cannot be questioned. How do you bring 27 opinions, I guess, or 27 interests, national interests, in a very short period of time, and focus them on coming up on finding a solution?
You know, the solution is quite simple, because all 27 member states gave a mandate to the chief negotiator. It's a team for more, I think, 100 really specialized people. Like on the British side, very qualified people who are who have no problem in the details. So there's a lot of details. I think 90% of the questions are done and is done in a very pragmatic way. I think Barnier is a French politician, and he was for a long time a commissioner in different dossiers. He was secretary in different dossiers in France. He's one of the most experienced people which we have. And I think he's really pragmatic. And I think Europe also went away from red lines. I think red lines is not the right attitude to go into negotiations. I think Barnier is a guarantee for having pragmatic, value-based, on same level debates. And we all know that for Britain, the sovereignty is a very important question. And sets us a principles to stay in a sovereignty like maybe United States. But within Britain, we have the problems that the United Kingdom, with a very interesting history, also gets problem within their own territory. So it's not only Ireland, it's not only the Scottish, it's a lot of movement between the people. And sovereignty means, like we always say, it's a question on which level, which kind of decision is done. So the local authority want to be sovereign, at least the families want to be sovereign. We ourselves want to be sovereign. So the question is on which level, which decision should be done. And I think that's a positive side of the European Union, that not only everything is going to Brussels. You know, we had all these stories that Brussels makes 80% of the decisions, but it's not true, because I also do a lot of decisions for myself. My city council makes a lot of decisions, the region, the national. So it's always a question of subsidiarity, on which level the decision is the best for the people. And I always say 100% of the people are taxpayers, and we have to take care that they can afford a well-being and good life. And now with this structure, which leads into chaos, into uncertainty, especially with COVID-19, it's a real multiplier. So we are moving into a high risk zone, and I think we can't hinder anymore poverty for a lot of people. And the one who have nothing, they will lose most, because they are dependent on the health systems, they are dependent on social aid. And, you know, if the money is gone and then if there's no distribution in a way like we did it up till now, you know, SMEs pay approximately 80% of the tax, and SMEs are hit hardest in this crisis. And also the new jobs are done by SMEs. I think 70% of new jobs are coming out of SMEs and not of the big international companies. And therefore, it's clear that this double crisis is a kind of hybrid war where we both will lose. So it's really stupid, maybe not to say stupid, but it's for the entrepreneurs and for the SMEs and the people who work every day. For them, it's a real burden. And I think we wouldn't need this burden. I think we should again try to work together. And I'm very hopeful that the idea of a united Europe and a global understanding with President Biden will be a big step into the right direction, because I think we need treaties and the rule of law in a good understanding, and not trade war and battles and military activities. So coming back to the soft power of Europe, I'm sure that after the negotiations, Britain and Europe will have a much better base, and maybe the next treaty, the future of Europe, I think Britain should be a guest in this new treaty, and maybe we can include Britain into a new form of understanding and living together, but also with the rule of law, with a juridical system where we both can trust, and where not the military or the secret service is making the decision. I think it's clear that the political level has to be stronger and more present in this so important decision making.
Thank you, Paul.
Can I come back on the idea of the decisions being made at different levels? Because I've always supported that. You really want to make every decision as close to the individual as possible, and only go up the chain if it's beneficial for everyone. But one of the things that we've really seen through this pandemic is the extent of power in our devolved administrations. So the rules for lockdown are different depending on whether you live in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. And we frequently have Nicola Sturgeon on our screens telling us what's happening in Scotland, and she's making different rules there, and indeed in Wales. And I actually shop in Wales because I live right on the border. So I'm very conscious of the fact that we have one rule one side of the border and one rule the other, which frankly I think is pretty daft. But so in some cases it would be much better. And I'm sorry that the all four administrations haven't come together to make the same rules, because I think for the for the citizen it would be so much easier if everyone was abiding by the same restrictions. So Wales had a lockdown a couple of weeks ago and it came out of lockdown on Monday, whereas the English people are locked down until the beginning of December. So in a way you can see that it's important to put decisions as close to the people as possible, but there are some things that are clearly, just confuse people.
Yes, I think it is a sign of the maturity of the democracy in the United Kingdom to have the devolved nations. All it would require is an act of parliament in Westminster to, of course, streamline all those regulations, rules and regulations, because Westminster still rules supreme. However, this is not done in order to make sure that very much the will of the people is respected, or the will of their representatives. Anthea, you have mentioned the elections in the United States before. Paul has. It was always seen that President Trump would be one of the strongest potential allies of a post-Brexit United Kingdom, partly also because of the special relationship on the one hand, and I don't think that would change between the administrations, the special relationship enjoyed between the United Kingdom and the United States. But in particular, if one believes the press, I have to say, the strong personal relationship between Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. Now, with potentially a different administration, because we still don't know to this day, it's still tentative, and probably for some time, with high-level litigation, most likely to be the outcome in the short term. Do you think a different administration would weaken Britain's position?
Well, the short answer is no, but let me give you the long answer. I think one of the mistakes that observers make is to think that the Conservative Party sort of allies itself with the Republicans and the Labour Party allies itself with Democrats, and frankly, this is not the case. Whichever government we have in Westminster is fully engaged with whatever party is in power in America. And if you go back a few years, you would say that both the Republican Party and the Democrats would fit within the Conservative Party in the UK. In America, you don't have any socialist parties, or none that come to power. So I can see that possibly under President Obama, there were things like Obamacare might be said to be looking more in that direction. But certainly over the years, it's been very much the case that the Conservative Party, I went to the presidential elections so long ago that I can't believe how long ago, but it was actually when President Reagan came to power. And I found that I could identify conservative policies right across the political spectrum in America. And the special relationship, I think, will continue. In a way, of course, America wants to have a deal with Europe, with the EU. It's a large trading bloc, and it makes perfect sense. But if you look at the importance of the UK to America, in terms of defence, we're by far the biggest contributor in the EU, and also in terms of international development aid, the UK is way ahead of all European countries. And I think that those things are very much appreciated by the Americans. And I think it goes back to so many people having their roots in some part of the United Kingdom, that relationship will continue. Of course, it wasn't just Boris. I mean, Theresa May famously went over to meet with President Trump when he held her hand down the steps, poor woman. But so there is always going to be a relationship that's very strong, very important to both countries. And I think that with President Biden, he was quite close to David Cameron when he was vice president. He was quite close to our then Prime Minister David Cameron. So I think that the relationship there would be very positive. I'm going to shut the window blind. I can't see out.
Please do. Paul, was there a sigh of relief that there potentially is a different administration in place next year? Do you think from a European Union point of view, will that make negotiating easier?
I wouldn't say easier, but the truth is that there will be maybe a big shift in the administration. The question is, how long does it now take till a real result from the US elections is published and is official? So it will be some pain till January, till we know who will be the next president. And the change of the administration, of course, will come up with a lot of new strategies, especially the international organizations like WTO, the World Health Organization, United Nations. We will see that this new administration is looking very carefully that the global development is under threat, and that we have to work together, like with the G20, and the negotiation power is, of course, also on the economic side quite interesting. When you see that the strategy after the Second World War was always to tell the Europeans, you don't need military, we do everything for you, to keep the military power as low as possible, also fights against nuclear and whatever was done. So we know that the new administration will come up with new patterns. So I'm sure, and Biden told it officially, said he doesn't like the Brexit strategy. And I think the influence will grow because a trade treaty with the United States at the present situation maybe that they send a treaty and you can sign it because the negotiation power from US would be very good. We know that there is still no CETA agreement for Great Britain, so Canada is not ready to join. We know that Turkey, and Turkey is also quite important for Great Britain, they are also not ready to get into a trade agreement. And European Union, of course, is from the negotiation power. If we stay together, it's a big difference if you are negotiating for 28 countries or if you stay alone. So the divide of power in Europe will not be helpful for both sides. And I know it from the WTO negotiations because it's also the questions on quotas and tariffs, where Britain has to find now own solutions. Of course, there will be a price for this because the more than 160 members of WTO will give it not for free to have all these activities done in the same way like now. So living on principles together with United States, I think is quite important. And why not thinking about sitting again on the same table and negotiating together, like we did it in the last over 40 years, together with United States. And I think that would also empower the UK if we don't break apart in the trade agreements. Why not doing it also in the future on the same table?
I think it's hugely important that we'll see the United States sort of rejoining the world. Paul's mentioned the various organizations that they will now be a part of again. And I think the other important thing is climate change, that we will see them at the next conference, and that provided Joe Biden is confirmed as the new president, then I do think that they will have a major part to play in the climate change targets, and that will be enormously helpful to the whole world, never mind just the EU and the UK.
Absolutely. We've got about roughly 15 minutes left of scheduled time. And I think it was very useful and very interesting for our understanding of the state of negotiations to also take the detour and look at the world as a whole. Looking at the impact of SMEs preparing for Brexit. Paul, how do you see negotiations to progress when it comes to something that should be straightforward, that is company statuses, registered companies that are limited companies in particular, that are incorporated in the United Kingdom at Companies House, but operating in the European Union, or even founded by citizens of the European Union under different, more liberal rules than is the case in a lot of European countries. Do you think this is something that we will have to say goodbye to, or is it something that is still very much part of the negotiations?
No, I think the trade is, of course, an important area because we have approximately a volume of 1,000 billion euro together with Great Britain. And in 2019, 50% of their imports came were done with European Union, and 47% on the other side. So import and export was approximately 50% from the European Union. And on the other side, for European Union, we had 4% export to Great Britain and 6% import. So 50% on the one side from Britain to European Union, and 4 to 6% from European Union to Britain. And that will have impact, and you have rightly spoken from the breakfast, because there is a calculation how much the change of this new working together will cost for the people who eat the normal breakfast, and which parts of the breakfast is getting more expensive, which part of the breakfast you can't get anymore because the delivery chain will be broken, and therefore it's clear that the negotiations should concentrate on the zero solution. European Union offers 3 key points. It's no customs duties, no quotas, and no dumping. I think that's quite important for both sides. And on the other hand, we want that Britain keeps the standards in environmental area, in the health area, in the social area. You know, just keep what they up till now agreed with European Union would be a good base of keeping some freedom for both sides. And I think that's one of the main points is also the freedom of citizens, the freedom of finance, the 4 freedoms from European Union. How can we come as close as possible to give as much sovereignty on the one hand, and on the other side, how can we get a solution where both sides could live with it? So I'm still optimistic, like Anthea, that we get a solution, because I had a long talk with the Irish finance minister, and he said it's not possible at all to be not able to reach a treaty. And I also had a talk with Theresa May, and I said, do you know that SMEs will have a serious problem, and that it will deduct your taxation, and that poverty is looking on the horizon? And then she said, no, we know what we do. So let's see if Barnier and our chief negotiator Groove, if they can find a solution. I think both are intelligent enough. I think both are pragmatic enough. The question is, how will the extremists and the media will handle a good treaty? And we know whatever they will negotiate, there is no praise for this.
What I would say is I think that the EU side shouldn't really worry about the standards and the regulations that the UK lives by. If you look at most of the health and safety legislation across Europe, it originated in the UK. The UK has had very high standards for health and safety, for food standards, for food hygiene. The standards are extremely high, and so I don't think that the EU side really needs to worry about that. I also would say to anyone thinking of starting up a business in the UK, and I hope people around the EU will seriously think about it, that the regulations for setting up a business in the UK are much more friendly than an awful lot of European countries. You find in some countries you have to register with the local Chamber of Commerce, that you have to have professional qualifications just to set up a business. That's not the case in the UK. So it's a very business-friendly environment. On the other hand, just a salutary tale, we have a company from Germany setting up a factory in my local town to manufacture PPE, face masks in particular, at enormous quantities, about sort of a million a week or whatever, or is it a day, but a lot. And they bought the premises, they converted it, this factory all ready to go. And at the moment, it's being mothballed because of concerns that if they manufacture here in the UK, they won't be able automatically to supply their customers in the EU countries. And so for now, they're just holding back to see what happens. And this is the danger that the UK faces, that without a deal, that companies won't be prepared to invest here. They'll put their new factories on the continent because they feel that will be safer for their long-term exports. So that's one of the reasons why it is hugely important that we get a deal very quickly.
I think that is a very good summary, and also a very good maybe final point to make. We're drawing close to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on the continent. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to the two of you, to our two experts. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much also on behalf of the attendees, and I think it's an eye-opener. I think it's almost like a suspense thriller. We'll see what happens. The Christmas break is also in between. But overall, I think it is very important to remain positive, and it was good to hear that both sides are maintaining their spirit and hope in the negotiation. So let me
They left it to me and Paul. We'd have a negotiated finish this afternoon.
Absolutely, and I'll prepare the breakfast. Thank you very much.